Welcome, everybody, to this webinar. My name is Mike Scott, and you're going to get some ideas today that you're going to be able to use almost immediately if you choose to do it. So I call this particular webinar how to proactively create the totally accountable workplace. See, when you're creating accountability, it's always proactive. You can't lay back and do it. You have to have the ideas and how it's going to happen. And that's what I'm going to give you today. Plus, what I wanted to do is I want to be able to give you the opportunity to take action on this and just try the ideas I give you. Use the tools I talk about. So I've been working in this business for over 35 years. I know accountability. I know companies. I've worked with over 3,500 companies, and I know where the issues are, and I know how to fix them if you want to. And it starts with is a system of accountability. Accountability is always the key to getting results. And doesn't matter whether it's a large company, doesn't matter if it's a small company, it always works. A system of accountability works. So I call it proactively creating the totally accountable culture or workplace. Again, accountability, my definition, doing what you said you would do, as you said you would do it, when you said you would do it, period. You see, the objective of accountability training is to make every employee you have be your best employee. So how do we do this? We got 3 goals for today. It's not going to be a long webinar, but it's going to be filled with information. Number 1, I want to talk about the clarity of delegated work, how crucial that is. Second thing I want to talk about is saying goodbye to non-performers. It's just amazing how we hold on to people we shouldn't be holding on to. People say, well, I got to have somebody there. Be careful. Be careful. It can be very dangerous. And number 3, the question is, what are you going to do after we have this webinar today? One thing you start putting into place to start proactively creating accountability. So one of the first things I want to talk about is this idea of clarity of goals. And there's a process I learned years ago called active listening. And there are 4 characteristics to active listening, and they're simple, but if they're used every single time you're communicating, you watch how things start to change. The first one is taking notes. It's amazing how many people don't take notes. They just got, You got that? Yep, got it. They don't. See, the statistics show that we only hear about 50% of what somebody says, and we misconstrue the rest of that. And you've heard me say before, I said that in a workshop one day, and the guy says, I said, smarter a person is, the less they hear. And a guy in a workshop said, wow, I must be a genius. We just don't hear what people say. So taking notes enhances that whole process. Second thing is asking clarifying questions. See, I want to set myself up for success. So I've got to have enough information to make sure I can be successful. And without asking clarifying questions, I'll say, well, you didn't tell me everything. Come on, we're working as a team here. Asking clarifying questions, very important. Third thing is eye contact. What happens is people talk with their eyes. And someone can say something to you and you say, is this what you meant? And they say, no, it's not what I meant at all. But that's what they said with their eyes. That's why eye contact is so important. And I'm going to tell you, if you're using Teams or Zoom, make sure people have their screens on so that you can actually see their eyes, they can see your eyes. And then the fourth thing is repeating and paraphrasing. So that's where taking notes comes in. You can actually repeat or paraphrase what it was that was actually delegated to you. Make sure you have total clarity. Extremely important. So those are the 4 characteristics of active listening: taking notes, asking clarifying questions, eye contact, and repeating and paraphrasing. So let me talk a little bit about this agreed on due dates and due times for completion for all delegated work. Let me tell you why this is so important. People have a lot of work. And if you say to somebody, get that done as soon as possible, okay, I'll put that on my pile called as soon as possible. You say, get that done by the end of the day. I've got a pile for end of the day as well, end of the week, as soon as possible when I get around to it. So what happens is these piles start happening, and what happens? I get overwhelmed, and when I get overwhelmed, my mind shuts down, and I'll go off and do anything but what I'm supposed to be doing. So dates and times for completion. And you see what you're basically doing there is when you say to somebody, I need this done by Tuesday at 3 o'clock. Wow. And a person says, okay, I'll have it done by Tuesday at 3 o'clock. that's when all of a sudden they start planning around that commitment that they made. Very powerful. Start doing this yourself. Anytime you make a commitment, commit to a date and time for having it completed and watch how that changes. I had a CEO of a company tell me, he says, we were dealing with a client, and the client says, oh, just whenever you can get around to it is fine. We thought, whoa, the pressure's off. Don't have to worry about it. And he says, the pressure was all of a sudden on. We didn't know when it was supposed to be done. We didn't know whether we were going to be on the right track or the wrong track. And he says, we went back out to them, like you said, and said, we'll have that to you by Friday at 3 p.m. And he said, okay, good. And he said, now we knew how to plan our time. And I'll tell you just a little personal story. Years ago, my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time. She said, Mike, would you do something for me? And whatever it was, I said, sure, yeah, I'll take care of it. And she came back in about an hour. She said, did you get that done? I said, no, I didn't get it done yet. She says, oh, Mr. Accountability. And I thought, oh, wait a minute. Boy, I wanted to take my finger out and blame her. You were wrong for that. You didn't give me a date and time. And I realized something that I teach is before you blame anybody for anything, always ask the question, what was my part in that? Wow. And I realized in that situation, my part was I didn't get clarity on the date and time for completion. So I decided rather than beat her up for it, what I was going to actually do is to say to her, when she asked me to do something, you want that done now, or would you like it done an hour from now? Most often it's now, but it's amazing how I set it up for success. The other way, I set it up for failure, and then I wanted to blame her. Dates and times, and then remember the other thing, repeating back. You've eliminated two major excuses here. I wasn't sure when you wanted it, and I wasn't sure what you wanted. Those two excuses go away when you have agreed on dates and times for completion and you have somebody actually repeat back what it was that they said they were going to do. Very powerful. Now remember, don't go out and tell everybody, all right, this is the way things are going to be. Go out and start modeling that behavior. When you make a commitment to somebody, you say, I'll have that done by Tuesday at 3, and then add this little statement. You can count on me for that. Whoa, that changes everything. People look at you like, wow, would you go to another workshop? You say, absolutely. Yeah, I've heard that on a webinar. So the other thing is, as I say, when you delegate work, make sure you've got a system of tracking the work. It doesn't matter whether it's a spreadsheet, whether it's an app, whether it's Outlook, whatever it might be, track the work. And I always say be able to categorize that tracked work. Track it by the date it's due. Track it by the person you delegated to, track it by the item that you actually delegated. That way, for example, if you sort it by the person you delegated to, when you do your one-to-one, you can actually go through it with them. Say, let's go through, where are you with this stuff? And it's amazing when you've tracked it, how work gets done. I've heard an expression years ago, work that isn't tracked doesn't get done. It's amazing how people just wait and wait and wait. They know you're tracking it, then things start to change. Now, I want to talk about something that's not easy, but it's got to be done. Saying goodbye to non-performers. Non-performers can create such discord inside of an organization. And what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to say, let's get the performance up. That's what I want to do. All my work is about getting performance up to the level that they're being paid for. But there are some people that are just non-performers. Somehow they either got into your company and they shouldn't have been there, or they got in there and their behavior started to change, or they had somebody who didn't hold them accountable, or maybe you weren't holding them accountable, and pretty soon they became non-performers. So take responsibility for that. Always ask the question, what's my part in it? So when you've got somebody that's not performing, start tracking a record, start keeping a record of that non-performance and the fact that you actually counseled them. See, that's the key is people, did you ever say anything to them about it? Well, no, but they just weren't performing and I didn't say anything. See, what we do is we tend to shift work away from people we can't count on to people we can count on and our non-performers. Not that they're bad people, they just get away scot-free, not performing, but they certainly will demand a full paycheck every single payday. So create a record. And a good way to be able to do this is what I call a surprise tracker. Years ago, I've decided that non-performers and performers needed records kept of them. Here's why. I developed a surprise tracker. And a surprise tracker, it was on a piece of paper, and it was when something happened that wasn't correct, I made a date, who it was and what the information was that was wrong. Then I was able to go back and actually counsel that person on specific information and get their performance up. Also, of course, on the positive side, if somebody did something really good, I made a record of it. I kept track of it. And what I had in my hand, my pocket on performance appraisal time was right there. I didn't have to worry about it. So use your surprise tracker. And as you see, here's the thing. When you're dealing with non-performers, you got to know exactly what to say. And so you can't just say, you did it wrong, and that's what you're a bad person. They're not. You've got to know what to say. For example, when somebody doesn't keep their word, don't say, why didn't you keep your word? Because then you're just going to get an excuse. I recommend you do this. Say, what's your next step to get it done? Well, don't you want to know why I didn't get it done? No, what I want to know is what's your next step to get it done? When are you going to do that? And can I count on you for that? And I want people to think if they're not going to get something done, they're going to deal with me. They're going to say, okay, if I don't get this done, he's going to say, what's your next step to get it done? I'll tell him this. When are you going to do that? And I'll tell him this. Can I count on you for that? So you see, you set people up for success proactively, even if they don't perform well. And so I use my book too. The book is called You Can Count on Me. The book is designed to help you say the things the right way as well. Also, use the ideas that we've got. So you see, you're not micromanaging when you're proactively getting accountability. What you're doing is you're really setting people up for success. You're staying on top of where the accountability is. So we talked about that surprise tracker. Really important to have with the surprise tracker to keep track of when people get off course, when people are on course. That's the QR code for the surprise tracker. If you take your phone and just hold it up in front of the screen right now, what you'll do is it'll give you the link to that surprise tracker. You'd be surprised how that surprise tracker works. And what I suggest is that you start using the surprise tracker on yourself. Track your own surprises of non-performance. Just see how often you aren't performing up to the level you're supposed to be, because whatever you're modeling is what people are doing. I've heard that as the leadership team goes, so goes the whole company. So whatever culture you have now takes time to change it, but do it slowly and take some of these ideas there and put them into place. All the ideas I talk about in all the training sitting right in that book called You Can Count on Me. That's the whole basis of that book, is keeping your word. QR code up there if you want to take a further look at that book or buy that book. Just go ahead and scan that QR code with your phone and you'll actually see what happens in terms of how things are done to proactively create a totally accountable workplace. So the tools are there. You got the surprise tracker, you've got the book, and live virtual training. It's amazing. Over the last 3 years, we've done probably about 200 virtual workshops using Zoom, and they have been absolutely as proactive and where people are working the whole time in them. They're 3 hours long. Do they ever catch a lot of good information? Absolutely. So that's one thing you can do. The other thing is when we have these trainings, here's what it looks like. We take a look at what we're tolerating. People say, well, I don't tolerate non-accountability. We'd be amazed how much you do tolerate non-accountability. We review that and look for ways to not tolerate non-accountability. Because someone said one time, Peter Drucker said, I think, whatever you're tolerating, you get more of it. Then we give you solutions on how to eliminate what you tolerate. Then we'll talk about eliminating surprises of non-performance. I mean, just think in the last 2 weeks, how many times have you been surprised by somebody's non-performance where they committed to do something, didn't do it, and you didn't know about it beforehand? Surprise. Again, how to proactively prevent non-accountability. You saw a couple pieces today, dates and times for completion, repeating back. Very, very important to be able to have that happen. How to effectively deal with non-accountability if it happens. I told you that. Somebody doesn't keep their word. Don't say, why didn't you keep your word? Why didn't you get it done? Say, what's your next step to get it done? When are you going to do that? Can I count on you for that? And then finally, talking about how to use an accountability partner. See, here's the thing that I find. When you need to get something done, make a commitment to somebody. that you're going to get it done by a specific date and time, and add the words, and you can count on me for that. So what I'm saying is, you've got a lot of information today. I say get hold of us if we can help you. TotallyAccountable.com, 800-990-6540. We're so glad to work with you. We want to be out there to work with you. And we know this Totally Accountability training actually works. So you can in-person training, very powerful. It's as powerful as the virtual training. We are now in the process of putting together a complete website with all this training on it, where you'll be able to have yourself and your team go through this anytime you want. It's a subscription. So what we talked about now today was clarity of goals, how important it is. If you get the clarity of your goals up front, you've now got a good chance of having the work done the way they said they were going to do it. Second thing is, say goodbye to people who aren't performing. Keep a record of it. Other non-performers, keep a record of their counseling. So if I have to say goodbye to them, you've got a record that you tried to keep them. And then finally, what are you going to do? So I want you to think about it now. What are you going to model starting today that you heard in this workshop or any workshop on accountability that could make a difference? It may be that you're going to start repeating things back. You're going to make a date, get a date and time for everything. You're going to start keeping track of mistakes people make and get them on the straight and narrow, get them on board, because otherwise you start having problems. And I hate to have to say goodbye to anybody, because remember the question, what was my part in it when I have to terminate somebody's employment? All right. So I am so glad you are here today. I'm glad you were here. Anything we can help you with, let us know. The number 800-990-6540, or go to the website totallyAccountable.com.